A photographic image is an abstract projection of a three-dimensional subject onto a two-dimensional image. In this respect, it's related to a painting, and like painting, photography is temporal, ideally creating a unique moment in time. Photographing a waterfall presents additional problems in time and space, as there are different elements occurring simultaneously regarding the brain's interpretation of what our eyes perceive. Therefore, there are four aspects of the typical waterfall that one might consider when shooting. 1. The actual waterfalls. 2. The water spilling into the pond in the foreground. 3. The background with or without sky. 4. The time of day, which includes position of the sun, cloud cover, and polarized light. The first consideration is how the human eye perceives the waterfalls. If the shutter speed is too fast, the perception of the soft flow of water is lost. The flow becomes static. If the shutter speed is too slow, the resulting image might be an aesthetic abstraction, which is fine if that's what the photographer intended. This cotton candy approach is quite fashionable and does lead to some lovely images. For myself, the ideal shutter speed would match our perception of the flow of water as can be observed in the video. Choosing the correct shutter speed can be really tough. This image was taken at a 50th of a second. The water appears frozen, but the pond in the fill looks quite natural. You can even see some bubbles in the detail. The sky is corrected somewhat by the use of a polarizer filter. It can also reduce surface reflections when present. This image was taken at a 10th of a second. Notice the nice flow of water over the cascades and a little bit of bubbly in the foreground. This picture was taken at an 1/8 second shutter speed. I wanted to demonstrate that the bubbles in the foreground disappeared. However, there are other startling things about this image. At the moment of exposure, the sun went behind the clouds, leaving an image with much lower contrast. Personally, I prefer the exposure at a 10th of a second, the previous exposure, because I like the lighting and the detail in the pond. For this exposure, I removed the polarizer and replaced it with a B&W number 110 neutral density filter. The exposure of this cotton candy beauty was 2.5 seconds. Black and white rendering can also be rewarding. And a 10-second exposure. Experimenting with longer exposures can be rewarding too. A few words about filters. The most important filter to own is a polarizer. In addition to its function, it will offer you a working neutral density filter of approximately 2 f-stops. If you plan to stack your filters, make sure that you order a filter for your largest diameter lens that you intend to use. I highly recommend brass filters and step-up rings for your narrow lenses. Brass has minimal chances of binding as aluminum does. If you purchase a neutral density filter, remember that stacking filters will tend to vignette using short focal length lenses. If you do intend to stack them, make sure filters are threaded on both sides. Remember to move into your subject and change the orientation of your camera. Previously, I did state that I prefer the shutter speed to yield a more realistic rendition. This shot was taken at a 10th second. I must admit I do enjoy the previous cotton candy rendition shot at an exposure of 2 seconds. That's the thrill of photography. There are so many ways of rendering an image. Neutral density filters now come variable and they are very expensive. The state-of-the-art filter is the new Singh-Ray Duo polarizing variable neutral density filter. Extremely long exposures can produce a color shift behaving very much like reciprocity failure on film cameras. This is probably caused by the sensitivity of individual sensors, not the neutral gray of the glass. When shooting waterfalls, take plenty of pictures with numerous exposures. Remember, every image will be different.